Welcome to lecture number 26. This is topic 3.11, Developing an American Identity. The theme is American and Regional Culture. The learning objective says explain the continuities and changes in American culture from 1754 to 1800. The first key concept says new forms of national culture developed in the United States alongside continued regional variations. The national culture that develops is going to be one that values egalitarian society. That means that they believe that all people are equal. This is furthered in the Constitution with the abolition of aristocratic titles. On paper, there is more religious toleration with the separation of church and states written into the Bill of Rights. However, this is more so a religious toleration of different Protestant religious sects. We'll see that in the middle of the 19th century that anti-Catholicism is still prominent. Most states have the separation of church and state. Only some states continue to have these established churches. This is where there are regional variations. For example, in New England, there are still established churches. In the South, slavery is still practiced and it's being phased out in the North. Political parties add another element to the regional variation. Federalists generally reside in the North where there is more manufacturing and therefore would benefit from Federalist policies. Meanwhile, the Democratic Republicans are in the South and they oppose the Federalist policies of greater tariffs and excise taxes. They rely more heavily on agriculture, and meanwhile, the Federalists believe that the future of the country was in manufacturing. The second key concept says ideas about national identity increasingly found expressions in works of art, literature, and architecture. The arts in America is something that truly begins to come to fruition. Artists like John Trumbull, Charles Willson Peale, Gilbert Stuart, and John Singleton Copley, all of these artists are basing their subject matter in scenes of the Revolution and scenes of the early Republic or portraits of the founding generation. The paintings of Washington resigning his commission at the end of the Revolutionary War, painted by John Trumbull, exalts him for rejecting too much power and drawing contrast to historical figures like Caesar. Famous portrait artists Charles Willson Peale and Gilbert Stuart painted iconic portraits like the one of George Washington that is in the National Portrait Gallery or sometimes hangs in the White House. Finally, John Singleton Copley, who was another portrait artist, made this portrait of Mercy Otis Warren. Mercy Otis Warren was a prominent, upper-class, educated woman who was involved in the Revolutionary movement and kept a correspondence with John and Abigail Adams. She's the first person to write a history of the Revolution. Her History of the Revolution consisted of several volumes, though ultimately John Adams was unhappy with his depiction in Otis Warren's writings. American English won't be standardized until 1806, in the following period, when Noah Webster will publish his first dictionary. Finally, for architecture, the new federal style is developed. It's taken after the federal form of government that resides in these new buildings. It takes elements of classical architecture with columns and domes. They're supposed to look important. They're meant to convey the importance of the building or the work that goes on inside of it. At the same time, Washington, D.C. is planned out as the nation's capital by Pierre Charles L'Enfant. John Adams is the first president to operate out of Washington, D.C. and moves into the White House. This movement of the capital came out of the deal between James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton would support the movement of the capital from New York City to Washington, D.C. if Congress would have passed his financial plan, which they did. All right, here's the final recap. A new national identity developed with regional differences, and art, literature, and architecture began to reflect the new culture. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, you can click on the video link on the screen. And if you are looking for more practice to help you on the AP exam, you can visit apushslides.com. I wish you the very best in all of your studying and look forward to seeing you back on the next lecture.